Hey everyone, welcome back to the Anderson Bros Outdoors. I'm Jake, and today we have the ever anticipated Vanquish VRD stance on the bench ready for review. Hey ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. As I stated, we are going to finally review the Vanquish VRD stance after we've got some runs through it. Before we dive into the actual footage of it running, I'm going to cover some basic things. We'll say pros and cons of this truck after being able to drive it some. So we're going to start with the electronics. The electronics, they actually function really well for what they are. I think this is a $15 controller. Doing some quick Google searching, it's relatively cheap. And what's really cool about it and what I really like about it is they finally have an instruction manual on how to use it. If you want to use it, feel free to check out the video that I did a couple of weeks back where we installed or opened a pheonix RTR Falcon Portal Edition, and we installed dig, overdrive, and a winch. Definitely don't recommend it for a winch. It does work for dig and overdrive, but for anything that's continuous, you can't speed up or slow it down. If your winch is moving really fast, you have to have really good control over this here channel 4 switch. Otherwise, you will be potentially breaking things. Removing the body, we were using a 3S the whole time, so a little 3S pack. This one's a ProTech. I prefer the Z batteries. This ProTech's getting a little puffy for my liking. The ESC and the motor actually worked really well. I was pleasantly surprised how well it would slow crawl. Now, the reverse is very touchy, so you're going to have to fix that in the controller. And also, the drag brake for stopping, it works, it's just ish. It's not perfect, but I don't expect it to be perfect. The other thing that impressed me, and I assume this is because of the weight of the truck, is the servo. The servo actually worked really well. It's not very fast, but it has enough torque that it is a drivable truck right out of the box. The electronics work. There's nothing bad about them. They're just not the best. They're mediocre. At least it works. I don't get a poor servo, and I can actually modulate the throttle in low speed and crawl things. So I would consider that a win. Moving into the rest of the truck, the body is fantastic. I know I talked about having a two-piece body, the option from the factory. And the funny story is I was watching the Vanquish live stream, and the first body they actually made for this was actually cab only. So I believe that's coming. Josh or whoever in the live stream did state that that was a possibility and very likely to come in the future. The body held up really well. It did take some tumbles. The stickers they're not as durable as you would like. You can see that the body does have some scratches on it. It is what it is. It's pretty typical. The body isn't flaking, so the paint is holding really well. No real issues there. It works. Now, moving into the rest of the truck, the first thing I really want to talk about, because I was super impressed with, is tires and the foams. These tires and foams are absolutely perfection. I did state that these were 5-inch tires. I don't know what I thought they were in the original review video, and could have sworn that I read on the tire that they were like 5.1 or something, or 5.0. Well, obviously they're not. They actually read 4.75 by 1.7 by 1.9. So these are technically legal for competitions. They work really, really well. Like this tread pattern and compound works really, really well. Now, the other super impressive thing are these dual stage inserts, the foam inserts. I was extremely impressed with them and how they function. If you watch the video, you'll see in the footage coming up that, they work good. We could talk about foams and 3D printed inserts and all this stuff all day. And as a matter of fact, I'm going to make a video on it at some point, but I'm not going to get into that. Just know that these are super impressive. Now, the only thing I didn't like about the wheels is they're two-piece instead of three-piece. They are beadlock. The problem that I have with plastic wheels is that if you can't put a metal hub in there, you could potentially round out the plastic hub. And since you can't put a metal hub in these, it's kind of problematic. Tires and inserts, I would give them a 5 out of 5. Best I've ever seen. The tire compound rivals the Canyon Trail from Traxxas. And I think that the Pheonix RTR is so capable because of the tire compound, which is the same as this. It's just a different, smaller tire. And it has a different tread pattern. Moving on, there's really only a few major differences between the stance and the carbon. Out of the box, it's going to be the electronics and the wheels and tires. The other ones are differences, but they're small. The major difference, or the next biggest difference in my mind, is the overdrive. So you're going from 37% overdrive to like a 20% overdrive, 21 or 24, something. I don't know. It is very noticeable. You can get by with the 24% overdrive. Personally, my driving style, I would prefer the 30 to 40% overdrive, but to each their own. This works really well out of the box. The other differences include the chassis is aluminum instead of carbon to save money. I think the links are the other difference, the small links. I've not had any issues with the links. If you look at the bottom of the truck here, it sits up so high that it doesn't really hit much on the diffs, which is nice, but again, it can be problematic. Everything else is nice and protected. I haven't had any problems with the links yet. I anticipate that I will, very likely. I've seen some people on Facebook and other social media sites, they have already bent the links in the rear and in the front. So it is a potential probability that you'll have to change them at some point. Personally, I would buy brass ones to have that weight down low. Overall, I am very impressed with this truck out of the box. In my mind, this is the number one RTR on the market for any type of rock crawling, hands down. I mean, the best out there, and it might be the best out there for a while. All of the other trucks are either remakes or they're not actual RTRs. Now, there are some things that I don't like. The first one being the height of the body. I think that the body sits up really, really high, and I'm not sure how I can remediate that yet. Now, that's not necessarily a knock on Vanquish or the truck. That's just something that I need to figure out how to fix. The other thing I don't like from the factory, and this is definitely a personal problem, and it's not something that I would be picky about, the shock configuration. It does feel really bouncy. They have kind of worn in. Now that I've been driving the truck, it's not as bouncy. Out of the box, it was super bouncy. I don't know if it was because there was air in the oil or what. It's not as bad now. The other really big problem is the front end unloads so easy, and since the tires are so tall, the truck just falls back. The truck weighs next to nothing, and it's fantastic. I love the fact that it's super light, and I would leave it super light. I think if you could figure out a way to have the suspension prevent it from unloading when you don't want it to unload, you've got a winner. It's just crazy. The biggest problem with the suspension up front and keeping it from unloading, you would have to use limiting straps or something, but the truck is so light that the limiting straps would have to be perfect, because if they weren't, when you go to articulate, the front suspension isn't going to articulate because the truck is so light. It's really challenging. I think realistically, if you're on a budget, a super budget, and you're actually using this to comp crawl, personally, I would likely remove the springs in the front and the rear so it ran at full droop all the time. And I would put some thicker oil. I'd probably put 40 to 60 weight up front and like 60 to 80 weight in the rear. And that way the body is going to keep the entire chassis, the shocks drooped at all times, like such. When you're doing vertical crawls, it's not going to unload because there's not going to be any springs there to push it back. That's really the biggest problem, is when you try to do anything that's really vertical, it unloads and the truck does fall back. Partially to do with the unload, but it's also partially to do with the overdrive. So it doesn't have enough overdrive to suck the front down and grab traction in the front before the rear pushes. It's really a two-part equation. And I think if I were to buy one of these trucks with the anticipation of upgrading it, the path for me for upgrading would likely be put a different ESC in there that's better, that has more control over drag brake and things of that nature, such as a 1080. So that's like 40 or 50 bucks. I'd leave the stock controller and motor and receiver because there's really nothing wrong with them. I would update the suspension. I would try and cheap out on that initially. I'd remove the springs, add the oil, and that you're looking at between 10 and 15 bucks for the oil there. And I'm saying that because you can get different weights of oil for that price. I think a bottle of oil is like 4 or 5 bucks. Remove the springs, cheap out there, not actually spend any money. And the other thing that I would do is I would get the overdrive gears either for the front portals or the transmission, and I would put those in there. You're looking at another potentially 30 or 40 bucks. Other than that, the truck really doesn't need anything. The other downside is that these sliders are so big, they're so wide. They do catch on stuff like in the back here and in the front where they shouldn't potentially. Can't really see any scratches on it. It did happen. Like it was occurring. The other problem is people were complaining about them being metal. I personally like that they're metal. They don't Float is easy over the rocks because they're metal. I have not found that to be a huge problem. I prefer that they are metal, but it is what it is. Can't please everyone. That's really the review that I have. This is the best truck that I've ever run right out of the box. It just works, and it's just impressive. And I don't want to sound like a fanboy or anything here, because that's certainly not what I am. I'm not sponsored by Vanquish by any means. On a scale of 1 to 10, if I were to buy it again, it would be a 20. Probably buy the RTR, and I'd buy a kit, so that way I could run the RTR while I built the kit, and then I would have a backup rig or rig for a spouse, a child, whatever, and have fun with you. Without further ado, let's jump into the footage.
Yeah. Nothing maybe like this. These are sick. Sand here. Cheap load with these. That, my friends, was impressive. Bone stock truck. Guess it always bellies out right there. Could be that these tires are really tall too. See, once that tire rear passenger falls off there like that, it's pretty much game over. I made a fire pit right here in this one. Definitely really light-footed. I mean, I think the weight is almost really good. Just needs more something. Of course, it doesn't help that it's super wet out here. We're in the sand now. Doesn't want to grab there. We'll give the old vertical a shot. See if we can do it in the winter. Shoot, tires hurt. A little slippery. Look at that. Look at that. Pretty impressive. No, it wasn't.